Under normal conditions, qualifying is often about timing. Sure, ultimately the fastest driver package combination should result in the fastest lap, but in order to make that happen, drivers need to be setting those laps at the best possible time. Now, a dry track is not a static track. Its grip levels change throughout the session with temperature and the rubber laid down through repeated use. If a track starts fairly green, that is, if there isn't much useful grippy rubber laid down on the racing lines and all the dust and dirt is yet to be swept away, then the continued setting of laps throughout a qualifying session will keep bringing the grip levels up and the lap times down. Let's look at a hypothetical Q1 session. It's 18 minutes long, which we'll plot along the bottom of a graph here. Let's use this orange area to represent grip levels, so we can show that over the course of the session, grip levels will steadily increase as the track is cleared up and rubber laid down. So let's use the vertical axis here to represent lap times. The further up the chart we are, the slower the lap time. The faster lap times, and what we're aiming for, will appear towards the bottom of the chart, and this will all become clear as we use it. So we can start to make some predictions about how our dry tyres will perform over the session. With grip rising all the time, the ultra soft tyre will start out giving us reasonable lap times, but will gradually be able to provide even faster lap times as the session goes on, thanks to increasing grip levels. So this line we're drawing is a rough prediction of whereabouts the lap times will be for the ultra soft tyre over the course of the session. So we might expect to see a lap time of 1 minute 14.4 right at the beginning, and see that improve to a 1 minute 13.6 by the very end. This is why you often see teams positioning themselves to be the last car out at the end of qualifying, to get that very last drop of potential performance from the track. This of course has to be balanced against getting good track position and not getting stuck among traffic. And naturally you could use softs or mediums, but they're always going to be the slower option and not useful unless you're sure you can get through to the next session with them. Now, getting yourself on track at the right moment isn't always perfectly simple. Once you leave your garage, you've got to take your out lap, driving once around the whole circuit before you even start your flying lap. This out lap is slower than the fast lap, not just because you have to navigate the pit exit, but because you're warming the car up and the tyres and getting everything prepped and positioned for your fast lap. You then take your fast lap to set your time and come back into the pits by taking another lap of the circuit at reduced speed, your in lap. You're then dragged into the garage, refueled, had your setup adjusted and sent out again. Now, this repeated process only leaves so many flying lap possibilities available throughout the session, and even fewer in Q2 and Q3 as those sessions are shorter in length. Sometimes you'll see drivers take 2 flying laps back to back, but this is more often to do with the tyres sometimes needing that extra lap of preparation than giving drivers 2 shots at a fastest time. All the while, remember, this is not an exact science. The out laps and in laps might be dramatically slower than expected if you have to get out of the way of faster cars, or if you end up having to slow down to avoid being stuck behind another car for your flying lap. Okay, so that's standard dry qualifying. That was really just to set up the pieces. Let's now look at Q1 at Hungary, which was decidedly less ordinary due to the unpredictable weather. Q1 started out with a wet track, but it wasn't raining. Let's indicate the wetness of the track with this blue area. So the track starts pretty wet, but without any rain to keep it damp, and with 20 hot cars sweeping around lifting up the water, the circuit quickly starts to dry. However, there are storms nearby and moving towards the circuit, so the expectation is that soon enough the rain will return and the track will get wetter again. The circuit at the start was wet enough for inters, and the lap times would continue to improve on the intermediate tyre as it dried up. So the plan was to fuel the cars up and have them run a series of fast laps one after the other in order to make sure they were on track at the right time when the track is at its very driest before the return of the rain. Sitting in the garage and waiting for it to seem at its driest was a no-no, as it takes such a long time to get the car on track and onto a hot lap that you could easily miss the window and get knocked out of qualifying, even at a top team. One thing everyone seemed sure of, the rain was coming back, and soon. So the drivers started setting lap times on inters, hoping they could get a decent enough time in the bank before the track got worse. However, 6 minutes into the session, everyone started to get a little twitchy. The track was drying pretty fast and the rain had not yet arrived. See, the prediction was that the lap times for the inters would reach a fastest point at the driest moment before the rain returned and brought the lap times back up again. So what you really wanted to be doing was setting lap times on the inters at around this area. The expected lap times for the dry tyres is more dramatic. Initial predictions for ultras showed they'd never quite be as fast as inters if the rain returned quickly enough, as the track would never properly get a dry line. But the fast drying track meant there was a possibility that the track would dry for long enough to give the ultra soft tyres the edge, even for a very short period. This adjusted model was enough to make some people question the gamble for dry tyres. Vettel, while still out on the inters, asked if teams they should switch, but was told the rain would return in 2 minutes and there'd be no point coming in, there just simply wasn't enough time. Meanwhile, in the midfield, teams started strapping on ultra-soft tyres, because why not? Sainz, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Sirotkin, Stroll, Alonso, Grosjean and Van Dorn all did racing pit stops to switch tyres, and what do you know? The ultras were much quicker, and it was suddenly starting to look like a disaster for Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, who had decided to stay out and keep lapping on the inters. If the rain came back and the dry tyre window closed, this part here where the ultrasoft is faster than the inters, then the top teams could have been squeezed out of Q1 with no means to set faster times, as they'd have to do an in-lap, quick change and out-lap before they could respond to these dry lap times, by which point the track could already be wet again. Whereas the midfield teams had made the decisions much earlier and were ready for the optimum time for the ultra-soft window opening up. As it turned out, the rain did not return in any meaningful way and all cars were able to set fast, dry lap times. Note though that Ricciardo was kept out on soft tyres, not ultras, as Red Bull seemed to think they had the pace advantage to get through on the harder tyre and not waste a set of ultras. And they only just squeezed through on Ricciardo's last lap. Q2 then. This was a whole other scenario which once again rewarded reading the forecast, playing the odds and taking the advantage. This one was a little bit more subtle. The track was still dry-ish after Q1 with the rain still expected to arrive imminently. The plan then was to get out on dry tyres and squeeze in a lap or two before the rain arrives, while the track was still dry. Once the rain returned, it would be impossible to improve your lap time, so getting a dry banker in early was crucial. Had the rain held off for a few minutes, the ultras would have been quicker for a long enough window to get out, set a lap time, before the dry tyres succumbed to the weather and became markedly worse than the inters. So everyone came out on ultra-soft tyres, except Vettel, who came straight out on inters, and this seemed very strange for about 30 seconds. See, what actually happened was it started raining almost immediately, so suddenly the dry tyres were worse than the inters before even the end of the outlaps. This means Vettel, already on inters, was able to set his flying lap straight after his outlap and set a time while the track was at its driest. Meanwhile, everyone else had to return to the pits after their outlap, quickly change tyres, take another outlap, and only then could they take their flying lap. All the while the track was getting wetter and wetter, meaning Vettel's time was well out of reach and he was home and dry. No pun intended. So as you can see, the lap times being set just got steadily worse over time. Ricciardo in particular struggled to set a good time early on, was left desperately trying to get into the top 10 on an increasingly wet track. In fact, things got so bad for Ricciardo that he still hadn't got out of Q2 by the wet tyre crossover point. That is the moment it got so wet that the wet tyres were faster than the inters. He tried a lap on the wets, but it was not to be and he was eliminated from Q2, all because he did not set a competitive lap time at the right time. So, unpredictable weather in qualifying requires patience, a keen eye on forecasts and the ability to take the right risks at the right time. Getting out onto the circuit at exactly the right time is not something you can do nimbly. It takes a long time to start a hot lap, so you need to be making forecasts at least 3 or 4 minutes ahead of when you want your driver to set time. Much like clay pigeon shooting, you're aiming for where you expect the track to be, not where the track is now. And that's tricky. Thanks for watching. Here's the quickie post-video Q&A as promised. So first, a follow-up on the low-profile tyres video. A couple of people mentioned that large wheels would mean larger brakes, and yes, I did neglect to go into that in the video, partly for reasons of length, but the truth is the brake size has not yet been finalised. The brakes could be as large as the wheel hubs, or the FIA could choose to keep the brakes small, which will mean there will be interesting choices to be made in the area around the brakes. Stay tuned. Survey also asked how the softest compounds would still work on low-profile tyres. Well, firstly, the tyre tread thickness won't necessarily change, just the height of the tyre, but also the rubber compounds are very likely to change through the whole range to meet the new demands. Alexander asked, do you want podium interviews back? Yes, actually. I really don't like the Parc Fermé interviews at all, and I think it's well worth giving the drivers a breather before they gather themselves for interviews. So far the interviews have been pretty rubbish because the drivers are amped up, looking to hug their team, gather themselves, they want a drink, etc. And sometimes, as we've seen with Lewis, they need a few minutes just to calm down a bit. And finally, I guess I brought this on myself, people asked about my cat. He's called Toby and he's seen here sitting on my video notes, and he's named after this guy right here. So thanks for the questions again, guys. I will see you soon. F1 Bingo, coming in August.